Ding dong. My phone suddenly rang with the notification tone for a special contact. It cut through the noisy dinner table with striking clarity. My fingers paused for a split second. I swiped open the screen. It was Hannah updating her status. In the photo, she was wearing a tight, midriff-bearing top, leaning intimately against her so-called male best friend, a guy named Walter. The heart-shaped tattoo on her flat stomach, that was once a little secret she had promised was meant for my eyes alone. My gaze lingered on the image for a moment before my finger tapped save. Chapter 1. What are you doing? A shadow suddenly fell across my phone screen. I looked up to see that Buck's big head had somehow appeared right in front of me without me noticing. Nothing. Buck let out a hee-hee laugh, pulled back, and downed a glass of beer. But just a few seconds later, he couldn't help himself and asked, "Seriously though, your girlfriend posts something like this, all over another guy, and you're not angry at all?" I shot a glance at his face, which was practically screaming I'm dying of curiosity, and replied lazily, "What's there to be angry about? She has a male best friend. Besides, now I've got a perfectly good reason to break up with her. Good for you, good for me, good for everyone. Are you for real?" Buck's eyes widened dramatically. "You literally had a huge fight with your parents during Spring Festival 2 years ago over wanting to marry her, and now you've suddenly figured it out?" Seeing the disbelief written all over his face, I simply unlocked my phone again, opened Hannah's post, and typed out a comment. "Since you chose someone else, I'll let go. Wishing you happiness." After hitting send, right in front of Buck, I smoothly blocked and deleted every way to contact Hannah in one go. Less than 3 minutes later, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed Hannah's best friend, Sarah. Before she could say a word, I spoke first. "Sarah, you were right before. Hannah really isn't worth my love." I paused briefly, then clearly delivered the second half of my sentence. "I accept your pursuit, Raymond. What are you talking about?" Hannah's sharp voice suddenly exploded from the other end of the line. I raised an eyebrow, pressed hang up without hesitation, and turned to look at Buck, who was completely dumbfounded. A playful smile tugged at the corner of my lips as I waved my phone slightly. "Tell me, do you think Hannah and her best friend are fighting right now?" Buck's honest, bewildered face somehow looked even more bewildered than before. Chapter 2. After eating and drinking my fill, I took a cab back to the large apartment my parents had bought for me years ago. When I pushed the door open, the motion sensor light in the living room turned on automatically. The emptiness of the place made it feel a little cold and lonely. My family runs a small business. We're not top-tier wealthy, but locally we're considered quite well off. If this were on the internet, people would probably call me a spoiled rich kid from a landlord family. Normally, at my age, talking about marriage would mean my parents arranging blind dates with girls of similar family backgrounds. Even if they weren't extremely rich, they'd at least come from educated, respectable families. The problem was that my mom has always had a very strong personality. My maternal grandparents' family was better off than my paternal grandparents, so major and minor family matters were all decided by her alone. My dad never interfered with my mom when it came to my upbringing. As a result, I could only ever be the obedient, well-behaved child. If she told me to go east, I'd never dare go west. If she told me to chase chickens, I'd never dare walk a dog. Oh, right, my family doesn't allow pets anyway. After graduating from college, maybe because of a delayed rebellious phase, I flat out refused my mom's suggestion to set me up with blind dates. I declared that I would find a girlfriend on my own. My connection with Hannah began when I had a fight with my family and dragged Buck along on a trip to cool off. While climbing a snow-covered mountain, Buck and I ran into Hannah and Sarah, who were also traveling together. When we reached the summit, Hannah was running out of strength. Sarah came to Buck and asked if he could help support Hannah on the way down. But Buck already had a girl he'd been introduced to through matchmaking, and he said he needed to uphold his male virtue. So he passed the task to me. At first glance, I was completely drawn in by Hannah's striking looks. Her skin was snow-white and delicate, and her long legs were so straight it felt like they could snap my neck shut. The icy wind on the mountain messed up her long hair, and thoroughly messed up my heart. They say trips make it easy to stumble into romantic encounters, and I was secretly delighted. On the way down, I learned we were all from the same city, so I asked Hannah for her contact information. The four of us ended up traveling together for the rest of the trip. After we got back, I went all out pursuing her. With 99% of my own charm and 1% of Sarah's assistance, it took less than a month for Hannah to agree to be my girlfriend. Chapter 3. When we first got together, the two of us were practically glued to each other 24 hours a day. Even being apart for just 1 or 2 hours would make the longing surge up uncontrollably. Whenever we had free time, our phone screens never went dark, just messages flying back and forth between us. From what we ate that day to spotting a cute little dog on the roadside, even the tiniest, most trivial things had to be shared immediately. One time I worked overtime at the office until late at night, when even the streetlights outside had already turned on. When I finally got off work and walked out, I saw Hannah standing at the company entrance, holding a thermal container. Inside was preserved egg and lean pork congee she had cooked herself. The rising steam blurred her features, and at that moment, I felt certain she was the one I wanted for the rest of my life. Later, when our relationship became more intimate, and I saw that trace of red on the bedsheets, my determination to marry her only grew stronger. Hannah's parents were ordinary employees, and her family background was fairly average. Fortunately, she was an only child, so there was no risk of her being the type who endlessly supports a freeloading younger brother. Given all that, I believed I could eventually persuade my parents to accept her. After all, my family wasn't short on money. Rather than marrying someone of equal status who might also be domineering, I'd rather marry a gentle, empathetic confidant who truly understood people. I'd seen enough of my dad's situation growing up. At home, he was completely under my mom's control. I'd already endured my mom's strong personality for more than 20 years. I had no desire to marry a woman just as formidable. As for whether Hannah might secretly be a gold digger in disguise, that wasn't something I worried about at all. Whether it was a prenuptial agreement, putting all assets under my parents' names while I lived on a basic salary, or even writing my dad an IOU for borrowing money to buy a house. If she revealed an unruly side after marriage, I had plenty of ways to deal with it. Of course, if she was willing to live a steady, honest life with me, then she'd enjoy wealth and comfort for the rest of her days. Chapter 4. During the first year of our relationship, I brought up Hannah to my parents during the spring festival. As expected, my mom reacted with fierce opposition. Even my dad, who usually stayed silent, spoke up against it. That new year wasn't a happy one. I turned around and went straight to Hannah's place for comfort. Less than 2 months after the holiday, Sarah suddenly announced that she had gotten a boyfriend, repeatedly bragging that he was a rich second-generation heir, insanely generous with his money. Later, I met the guy once and listened to him animatedly boast about himself. My family owns dozens of commercial properties. I get $500,000 a month just for allowance. Watching the other person brag at full throttle, I was so embarrassed I almost dug a 3-bedroom apartment out of the floor with my toes. People like that simply didn't exist in my social circle, and the more I listened, the more unreliable he sounded, borderline like a scammer. Considering that Sarah had helped me quite a bit back when I was pursuing Hannah, I asked someone to quietly look into his background. Turns out he wasn't a complete fraud. His family did have some money, but nowhere near as much as he claimed. That so-called $500,000 monthly allowance was probably his entire family's monthly income. At best, he barely brushed against the edge of being called a rich second-generation kid. On top of that, he switched girlfriends frequently, gave fake luxury gifts, and was extremely stingy. I told Hannah about this and asked her to remind Sarah to be careful. Sure enough, Sarah went to official brand counters to verify the gifts, and almost all of them turned out to be fake. She had a huge fight with the guy and broke up with him. During that time, Hannah often went out to comfort Sarah. I didn't think much of it back then. What I never expected was that this would become the beginning of Hannah and me drifting apart. Chapter 5. From that point on, Sarah started hanging around bars every day, her face caked with heavy makeup, her eyes filled with an exhaustion that never seemed to fade. Hannah kept saying she was worried something might happen to her, and every time Sarah went to a bar, Hannah would go with her. I genuinely hated places like that, crowded, chaotic, full of shady people, and more than once I told Hannah, "You're not allowed to go. Sarah is an adult. She can take responsibility for her own actions." In my view, even if Sarah got drunk and ended up being taken advantage of, that would be entirely her own fault. It was just a breakup. What was the big deal? Did she really need to act like her life was over? Lower her standards a bit. It's not like she can't get married. But Hannah was different. If someone even brushed her hand, I'd feel uncomfortable for hours. Yet Hannah refused to listen to me at all. Every time, she'd frown and argue back. "She's my best friend. I can't just watch her destroy herself." Later, she even told me that Sarah had gone to the hospital and been diagnosed with depression, which made it even more impossible to ignore her. Because of this, we started arguing more and more frequently. At first, I patiently tried to reason with her, respect other people's fate, let go of the urge to play savior. But Hannah accused me of being too cold, too selfish. As the arguments piled up, the sweetness we once had slowly wore away, and the atmosphere between us grew increasingly tense. What truly made me completely lose faith in her happened one late night. That night, I waited at home until almost 2 in the morning before Hannah finally stumbled in through the door. She carried a faint smell of alcohol, mixed with the cheap perfume Sarah always wore. The anger I had been suppressing all night instantly exploded. Just as I was about to question her, she staggered toward me and tried to hug me. Every time before she'd done this, using a couple fights at the bedside and makes up before morning routine to placate me. I was still burning with anger, but I didn't push her away. Taking advantage of the alcohol, she leaned in and kissed me, and just as she unbuttoned her shirt and exposed her lower abdomen, I caught sight of something new, a heart-shaped tattoo on her stomach. It wasn't anything outrageous, no succubus-style nonsense, just a simple pink heart. Even so, it struck me like a bolt of lightning. Chapter 6. Let me give an example. When someone really needs to take a dump, they search everywhere before finally finding a public restroom. But then they realize the place is absolutely filthy. Even so, most people will still grit their teeth and make do, planning to wash themselves properly once they get home. That night, I still didn't refuse Hannah. The next morning, after waking up, Hannah took the initiative to apologize. In a low voice, she explained that the heart tattoo was something Sarah had dragged her to get. She said that if she didn't do it, Sarah would accuse her of not treating her like a real best friend and even threaten to cut ties. In a moment of impulsive stupidity, she had agreed. At the same time, Hannah assured me that this tattoo would only ever be shown to me. I didn't lose my temper with her, because I had already thought everything through the night before. Whether she was genuinely manipulated by Sarah with emotional blackmail, so foolish that she went along with a random tattoo, or whether she used comforting a friend as an excuse to indulge herself, the essence of it was the same. The former was stupidity born of poor judgment. The latter was concealed moral rot. Either way, she was absolutely not the kind of woman I wanted to marry. With a family like mine, if I really brought home a woman covered in tattoos, leaving aside the fact that my mom would skin me alive, the gossip alone would drown us both. Did I even want to keep living like a normal human being? Besides, tattoos, sure, you can remove them, but doesn't that still leave scars? What really stung was thinking about how, over the past 2 years, I had given her my heart and soul. Just in gifts alone, I had spent over $300,000 to get my parents to accept her. I'd fought with my family again and again, nearly wearing my mouth out arguing. Not long ago, my parents had finally loosened their stance, saying they were willing to find time to meet her parents and discuss marriage. And now she pulled something like this on me. I was furious on my own behalf. I really had turned into a spoiled rich kid from a landlord family. Chapter 7. Once the idea of not marrying her took root, the world suddenly felt wide open. After figuring things out, I actually no longer felt the urgency to break up immediately. Since my sincerity had been fed to the dogs, I might as well get some compensation for myself. I wasn't about to let 2 years of investment go to waste. I started making demands of her. Tight hip-hugging skirts, flight attendant outfits, the whole wicked stepmother dress style. All the clothes I'd once wanted Hannah to wear for me but had been too embarrassed to ask for, I brought them all up. At first, Hannah frowned and tried to refuse, saying she couldn't accept it. Her tone was full of reluctance. I didn't bother arguing with her. I simply said that if she didn't want to, we'd break up. You were willing to wrong yourself and get a tattoo for Sarah, but now you won't even wear a few nice outfits for me. If you care so much about your best friend, why don't you just go live with her instead? At first, she tried giving me the cold shoulder, thinking I was the same as before, that I'd cave within 3 days and come back to comfort her. But this time, I was resolute. I didn't answer calls or reply to messages. In less than 2 days, she couldn't hold out anymore and came to me on her own. Raymond, I was wrong. I'll wear those clothes. Okay. After a few rounds of back and forth like that, she was completely under my control. For more than half a year afterward, whatever style I wanted, she obediently cooperated, never daring to put on an attitude again. Watching her, who used to act willfully toward me, now carefully trying to please me, all the pent-up frustration in my heart dissipated. Life became indescribably comfortable. Chapter 8. It seemed she had finally noticed my growing coldness. Hannah started pushing the topic of marriage more and more urgently. She even reduced contact with Sarah. Every time, I brushed her off, saying things like, "What's the rush? We're still young." When her questions started to annoy me, I told her to prove her love for me. If she could be persuaded by Sarah to get a tattoo, then she should be able to do the same for me. So I casually told her to tattoo my initials on her lower abdomen as well. I didn't expect that my offhand remark would actually send her to do it. Instead of feeling touched, I looked down on her even more. Just as I was thinking about how to bring up breaking up with Hannah without hurting her too badly, she told me she had met a male best friend and wanted to introduce him to me. Since I had already decided to come clean and end things with her, I naturally refused. So Hannah showed me photos instead and asked if I minded. Well, would you look at that? She even handed me a breakup excuse on a silver platter. What was there for me to mind? Chapter 9. Early the next morning, after washing up and putting on my suit, I prepared to go to work as usual. When I opened the door, the scene outside made me pause. Hannah was squatting at my doorstep, her arms wrapped around her knees, her head buried in the crook of her arms. Hearing the sound, she suddenly looked up, her eyes filled with tears that hadn't yet dried. Husband. She saw me and croaked out the word hoarsely. She wiped her tears messily and tried to stand, but staggered after squatting too long. There were faint scratch marks on her cheeks, and her hair looked like a bird's nest. Clearly, she had gotten into a real, physical fight with Sarah. I looked at that once stunning face that used to leave me utterly infatuated. Now it was sloppy and unkempt, with none of its former charm left. I called you all night, but couldn't get through. She sniffled pitifully. I was afraid you were asleep and didn't dare knock, so I just waited here. She reached out to tug at my sleeve, her eyes full of ingratiating pleading. If this had been before, I would have been heartbroken at the sight of her like this, but now, all I felt was irritation, like looking at a stray dog rubbing itself against passers-by on the street. Without a word, I took a step back to avoid her touch and asked coldly, "What do you want?" My distance made her eyes redden even more as she choked out an explanation. "Husband, there's really nothing between Walter and me. It was Sarah." "No, Sarah, that bitch. She said you'd been too cold to me lately and must be planning to break up. So she told me to post that update on purpose to test your reaction. I had no idea she was secretly pursuing you behind my back. She just wanted to drive a wedge between us and break us up. You expect me to believe that?" I couldn't help letting out a mocking laugh, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "And don't call me husband. I'm not as casual as you are. That word is reserved for the woman I'll formally marry someday." Hannah's face instantly turned deathly pale. She opened her mouth, still trying to say something. I didn't give her the chance. I walked around her and headed straight for the elevator. She reached out to grab me, but I shook her off without hesitation. Chapter 10. That evening, when I walked out of the office building after work, just as expected, Hannah was standing under the streetlight by the entrance. She looked a bit more put together than she had that morning, but the exhaustion in her eyes was still impossible to hide. I had already known she wouldn't give up so easily. Setting aside the feelings that had probably long since vanished, my family background and overall circumstances were, to her, an absolute marriage ceiling she could realistically reach. She understood that better than anyone. To put it bluntly, even if I married another woman with a family background similar to hers, as long as I was willing to give her $50,000 a month for living expenses, even if I actually did something out of line, plenty of people would choose to turn a blind eye. No matter how stupid someone is, once they see their money bag about to slip away, the water in their brain will drain out pretty quickly. Unfortunately, the ending between Hannah and me had already been sealed the moment she went to get a tattoo for so-called best friend loyalty. Before Hannah could say anything, I dropped the ultimate female lead novel nuclear bomb. "Hannah, I don't love you anymore." Those words were like a key. Hannah immediately broke down in tears. I had thought that once I said this, she would have the sense to understand that there was no longer any possibility between us and walk away. But the very next second, she suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my wrist tightly. I frowned helplessly. Sure enough, in real life, those words were nowhere near as effective as they were in novels. "Raymond, give me one more chance." Her voice trembled through sobs. "I swear, I'll never have contact with Sarah or Walter again. Believe me, Sarah really isn't a good person. She's the one who stirred things up between us." I yanked my hand back forcefully, my voice cold as ice. "She's not a good person, and you are." Seeing her freeze, I continued. "For the sake of the 2.5 years we spent together, I don't want to make things too ugly. But if you keep pestering me like this, don't blame me for being ruthless. I'll sue you and demand you return all the gifts I gave you over the past 2 years. Are you really that heartless?" Hannah's face instantly drained of color. Disbelief filled her eyes, and even her voice was shaking. I didn't look at her again. I turned and walked toward my car parked by the roadside, leaving her alone under the streetlight, her sobs torn apart by the evening wind. Chapter 11. After completely cutting ties with Hannah, my life quickly returned to normal. I was honestly relieved that she didn't come back to bother me again. Otherwise, if I really had to deal with her, the outcome would have been something she couldn't handle. After all, we had dated for 2.5 years. I didn't want to be too cruel. The only change was that once my parents found out I'd broken up, they started pulling strings everywhere to introduce me to potential matches. This time, I didn't resist like before. Instead, I accepted it calmly. That 2.5-year relationship with Hannah had effectively worn away my rebellious phase, and it made me understand something. People you choose based purely on feelings often aren't nearly as reliable as those your parents introduce. Somehow, the news that I was going on blind dates reached Buck's ears. 2 days later, that guy sneaked down to my office building like a thief. "Raymond, let me ask you something serious." He looked mysterious. "Do you want a wife? If you do, I can deliver one to you." I nearly laughed. "Sure, send her over." Then, the moment the words left my mouth, I kicked him in the ass. Jokes aside, Buck wiped off his goofy grin and said seriously, I'm serious. My wife's younger sister just came back from studying abroad. You've met her before. Her family's stressing about setting her up on blind dates anyway. How about I arrange for you two to meet? I fell silent and thought it over carefully. I knew Buck's in-laws' situation very well. Although Buck was richer than his wife's family, anyone with eyes could tell that when he married her, he had married up. If he hadn't been tall, good-looking, and sweet-talking, it honestly might not have worked out. I rubbed my chin and stared at him. You're introducing me to your sister-in-law because you want me to get scolded alongside you by your father-in-law, aren't you? Buck chuckled and didn't bother hiding it. Mainly, I still want you to call me brother-in-law. Get lost. I rolled my eyes hard. Chapter 12. A few days later, I still accepted Buck's invitation and went to meet his sister-in-law, Wendy. My family and Buck's family are genuinely old family friends. Coincidentally, we were even born on the same year, the same month, and the same day. The only difference was that I was born in the morning, while he was born at night. Yet somehow he grew up tall and burly, the stereotypical tough guy, while I turned out tall and skinny, with features that leaned a bit toward the delicate side. Some people even said I looked like a eunuch. That really pissed me off. Buck always wanted me to call him Big Brother, but I deliberately liked calling him Little Brother. The two of us grew up roughhousing together, always joking and fighting, and our relationship has always been close. Back in high school, I got obsessed with a character from a TV drama. He wore his hair in a small braid, so I copied him and grew one too. One time after school, Buck and I finished dinner and went for a walk, and we ran into one of his classmates. That person even asked him whether I was his girlfriend. I knew Buck would never screw me over. If he dared to introduce his sister-in-law to me, it meant the girl's character was absolutely trustworthy. In fact, I had already seen Wendy once before, at Buck and his wife Diana's wedding. Her older sister Diana was a famously aloof beauty, cool, elegant, and dignified, while Wendy was a completely different style. She was only about 158 meters tall, with a baby face full of lively charm. A textbook, cute girl. I still remember that when I first saw her, I almost thought she was some relative's kid who'd been brought along. Only later did I realize she was the bride's younger sister. We agreed to meet at a quiet private restaurant. As soon as we sat down, she spoke first, her tone straightforward and honest. You probably already know my family situation. In the future, my family will focus on developing my sister. I don't really have big ambitions myself. This life is basically about taking it easy. She lifted her teacup, took a sip, and continued. If we get married, I can guarantee I'll take good care of the household. If we have kids, I'll spend plenty of time with them. But I have one bottom line. I won't tolerate cheating, and I don't agree with everyone plays their own games. If you're married, you're responsible to each other. After hearing that, my eyes actually lit up. I was quite satisfied with her conditions. To be honest, I don't have grand ambitions either. I just want to live my own small life well. What I fear most is the kind of partner who's so busy they never touch the ground, goes 10 or 15 days without saying a word, yet still demands absolute loyalty from the other person. Just thinking about that kind of life is suffocating. Just like my dad. Can you imagine a billionaire being caught by his wife, who finds a sex toy hidden in his wardrobe? The awkwardness alone is unbearable. Maybe because our values aligned so well, our conversation afterward flowed exceptionally smoothly. After my parents found out I was dating Wendy, they had no objections at all. On the contrary, they kept urging me to quickly discuss meeting the parents with her. That was only natural. They had always said before, look at the wife Buck married, and then look at the one you found. She's not presentable at all. They were practically drooling with envy. Chapter 13. I thought my grudges with Hannah and Sarah were already over, but I didn't expect that just as I got off work one day, Sarah would block me downstairs at my company. Sarah wasn't stunning, but she could be considered mildly pretty. At this moment, though, dark circles hung under her eyes, and she looked utterly worn down. The moment she saw me come out, she rushed over and reached out, trying to grab my arm. Raymond, please, I'm begging you, go talk to Hannah for me. Her voice trembled with sobs. She's spreading rumors everywhere, saying I slept around and got AIDS. She's even threatening me, saying if I dare sue her, she'll kill my whole family. I'm really about to go insane from her. I sidestepped her touch and let out a cold laugh. You deserve it. I stared straight into her panicked eyes and said each word slowly. Wasn't it you who couldn't stand seeing Hannah living better than you, scheming every way possible to drag her down? Now that you've gotten exactly what you wanted, you should naturally bear the consequences. In truth, when I previously told Hannah that Sarah was pursuing me, it wasn't entirely a lie. Once, Sarah had privately approached me and suggested that I financially support her. I rejected her on the spot, leaving aside the fact that I don't juggle multiple relationships. Just seeing how she was clubbing every night back then, with people constantly coming and going around her, I couldn't help but maliciously wonder whether she might have caught something. Prejudice is part of human nature. Just like how many people say, don't discriminate against girls with tattoos who go clubbing. Yet when those same girls look for someone to marry, they rarely choose men who also have tattoos and live in clubs. After Hannah went and got tattoos, I even maliciously wondered whether her first time was artificial. Sarah's face turned pale, then flushed red. She opened her mouth several times before finally forcing out, "Raymond, I was wrong." "You're not aware that you were wrong," I interrupted her calmly. "You're just aware that you went too far." When Hannah was living happily before, Sarah felt unbalanced inside. I wasn't blind to it. That was why I gave Hannah chance after chance, hoping she'd wake up sooner. But kind words can't save someone determined to self-destruct. The adult world has never been about educating people, it's about filtering. You choose. You don't change. That was the most profound lesson Hannah taught me. I couldn't be bothered to keep entangling myself with her. I waved toward the company security office and said loudly, "If you see this person lingering downstairs again, call the police immediately." Sarah's face went deathly pale. She staggered back 2 steps, looking at me with eyes full of despair. Chapter 14. Time passed just like that, unhurriedly, and a year went by. My relationship with Wendy didn't go through any melodramatic twists or drama. From confirming our relationship, to talking about marriage, to holding the wedding and going on our honeymoon together, everything followed naturally, as if it were meant to be. Hannah never came back to look for me, and there was no scene where Wendy had to publicly put her in her place. Buck finally got what he wanted and officially became my brother-in-law. Back then, I always took advantage of being born a few hours earlier and called him little brother every chance I got. Now the tables had turned. Whenever he got the chance, he'd call me brother-in-law, in the greasiest way possible. Every weekend, Wendy and I would go to my mother-in-law's place for dinner. Buck and Diana always showed up on time as well. The dinner table was lively and noisy, and after the meal, my father-in-law loved to keep Buck and me behind for a heart-to-heart. His tone was strict, but his words were always forward-looking and insightful. With his guidance and support, both Buck's company and mine kept expanding, and business flourished. After marriage, Wendy turned out to be exactly as reliable as she had said during our blind date. Her job was stable. She worked regular hours from Monday to Friday and rarely worked overtime. On the other hand, I was the one who occasionally stayed out late and had to travel for business from time to time. I realized that I was truly the type who just goes with the flow. When I was dating Hannah, I was attracted to mature, strong-willed women. After marrying Wendy, I somehow turned into someone who adored cute, petite girls. As time passed and feelings deepened, I found myself liking her more and more. So one time, I cautiously suggested, "How about you come with me when I travel for work on weekends?" She didn't object. The result was that not long after, Wendy became pregnant. Once the news spread, both families' elders were overjoyed. After all, Buck and Diana had been married for 3 years with no news at all, and this had Buck anxious beyond measure. Maybe good fertility luck really is contagious. Less than 2 months later, Diana was also confirmed to be pregnant, a genuine double blessing. 7 months later, Wendy and I welcomed our daughter and named her Stella. 2 months after that, Diana gave birth to a son, who, at my father-in-law's insistence, was named Alan. As for Hannah, she was like a hastily written footnote in my life. From that point on, she never appeared again. Extra story, Sarah. Chapter 1. I am a successful woman, at least when it comes to destroying Hannah. I did it to perfection, but I am also a complete failure. Hannah's retaliation came fast and ruthless. Rumors about my chaotic private life and catching a disease spread like they had wings, reaching all my relatives and friends. When I walked down the street, I always felt people pointing and whispering behind my back. Former friends distanced themselves one after another, and even my family felt I had brought them unbearable shame. Sitting on a train headed out of town, the scenery outside the window kept sliding backward. In my mind, the scene of first meeting Raymond replayed with painful clarity. It was on a snowy mountain in North City. Hannah had run out of stamina and was shouting, "I can't walk anymore." At a glance, I spotted Raymond and Buck not far away. Raymond was strikingly eye-catching, with a face that looked like it belonged to a celebrity. Not just his looks, his aura was similar too. Just standing there, he already seemed different from the surrounding tourists. When it comes to good-looking men, women can be very proactive. I walked up to Buck, smiled, and said, "Big brother, my best friend can't walk anymore. Could you help her for a bit?" I thought Buck wouldn't miss such a perfect hero saves the beauty moment, and that I could naturally move closer to Raymond and exchange contact information. If his conditions were good enough, maybe things could even develop further. But what I never expected was that Buck turned out to be a blockhead and actually handed the chance to help Hannah over to Raymond. What caught me even more off guard was that Raymond ended up falling for Hannah. After learning that they were from the same city, he launched an aggressive pursuit. To say I wasn't angry would be a lie. Hannah and I grew up together. When we were young, I didn't feel much about it. but the older we got, the more often I found myself irritated by her. Hannah was beautiful, fair-skinned, with dimples when she smiled. Wherever she went, she became the center of attention, and even though I wasn't bad-looking myself, the moment I stood next to her, I became nothing more than a background prop. Out of consideration for over a decade of friendship, I didn't resent her too deeply at first. That changed when I saw Hannah posting updates showing off the luxury bag Raymond bought her, worth tens of thousands, and their candlelight dinners at 5-star hotels. The jealousy in my heart grew like wild vines, wrapping tightly around my chest. Our family backgrounds were similar. We were both from ordinary working-class families. She was just a bit prettier than me, so why did she get to land a rich second-generation guy like Raymond? If Raymond were only handsome, maybe I could have accepted it, but he was rich, generous, and genuinely devoted to Hannah. That gap made my jealousy twist and crawl in the dark. I became obsessive, constantly wanting to find a man with conditions equal to Raymond's. Someone who could outshine Hannah. That was when Cashin appeared. Cashin claimed to be a rich second-generation heir. On our first date, he took me to a Coach boutique and casually bought a 3,000 yuan bag for me. I was completely dazzled by this sudden generosity and agreed to his pursuit almost without thinking. I was too eager to use a seemingly glamorous relationship to soothe the jealousy surging in my heart, but that glamour didn't last long. That day, Hannah once again flaunted a limited edition bag worth 20,000 that Raymond had bought her. With red eyes, I turned around and coquettishly hinted to Cashin that I wanted a bag at the same price. Cashin stared at me for a long while, then smiled and said, "You can have the bag." "Sure, but baby, how are you going to reward me?" I wasn't naive. In the past, I would never have agreed. I had always held on to the idea of marrying up and knew how important a girl's purity was. But that day, jealousy overwhelmed my reason. As I looked at Hannah's posts, I nodded as if possessed. I thought that by giving up my first time, and with a bit of wishful thinking, Cashin would marry me once he knew I was a virgin. What I didn't expect was that Cashin was a complete fraud. Aside from the first bag he bought at a physical store, every bag and necklace he gave me afterward was fake. When I confronted him, he shamelessly admitted it. Then he walked away without a second thought, leaving me alone in my rental apartment, clutching those fake accessories and crying all night. I was like a ridiculous clown. For a 3,000 yuan bag, I let him toy with me for 3 months and lost the first time I had treasured above all else. And the source of all this was Hannah, because she had everything I wanted. From that day on, the jealousy in my heart completely turned into hatred. Chapter 2. I started drifting from one bar to another, numbing myself with ear-splitting music and the stinging smell of alcohol. Every time before I went, I would pester Hannah relentlessly and drag her along with me. Hannah was soft-hearted and couldn't withstand my pleading, so she accompanied me every single time. She would sit by the bar and keep persuading me over and over again. "Sarah, Cashin is trash. He's not worth ruining yourself for. You're so pretty, you'll definitely find someone who truly loves you." Looking at her sincere, comforting expression, all I felt was disgust, especially when Raymond, worried about her, would come along every time, even though he clearly hated bars. That only made me feel more strongly that Hannah was showing off in front of me. That sense of unwillingness and resentment grew stronger and stronger, and I began finding every possible excuse to drag Hannah to bars. I refused to believe Raymond would always be free. Sooner or later, he'd be too busy to show up. When that happened, as long as Hannah drank too much and got taken advantage of, given Raymond's family background and temperament, he would definitely dump her. As long as I could destroy her happiness, my heart would finally feel balanced. Unfortunately, Hannah might be stupid, but she wasn't stupid to the extreme. Every time we went to a bar, she refused to drink. Watching her stay by my side and repeatedly drive away men who tried to harass me, I would occasionally feel dazed, wondering if I had done something wrong. But the moment that thought touched the name Raymond, it vanished into thin air. I watched them bicker and fool around, yet never break up, and the anxiety in my heart grew heavier by the day. I was truly afraid that one day Raymond would successfully persuade his parents and marry Hannah in a grand ceremony, letting her live the kind of life I could never reach in my entire lifetime. I had to speed things up. Then a thought suddenly popped into my mind: tattoos. A family like Raymond's, one that cared deeply about reputation and propriety, would definitely never accept a future daughter-in-law with tattoos on her body. I started whispering in Hannah's ear every day, saying tattoos were a special mark between best friends, proof that we'd never be separated. At first, she firmly refused. I kept pestering her, crying and accusing her of not treating me as a friend. I even threatened suicide, claiming that if she didn't get a tattoo, we'd cut ties and I'd jump off a building. In the end, Hannah compromised. When the tattoo artist inked the pink heart on her lower abdomen, I stood nearby, unable to stop the corners of my mouth from curling upward. But what I didn't expect was that after Raymond found out, he didn't bring up breaking up. That outcome was like a bucket of cold water dumped over my head. chilling me to the bone. One plan failed, so I came up with another. Since I couldn't destroy Hannah, I'd go after Raymond instead. I made an excuse to ask Raymond out alone, wore the most revealing dress I had, deliberately leaned close to him, and hinted, "Hannah is too innocent. There are a lot of things she doesn't know how to do. We're best friends, if you like. I can be your side piece." Raymond's expression instantly turned cold. He looked at me like I was something filthy, threw out a single word, "Get lost," and walked away. I failed again. No matter. I still had another plan. So I introduced Hannah to a so-called male best friend. Walter wanted to get sex for free. I wanted to break them up. We hit it off immediately. To my surprise, it went extraordinarily smoothly. Hannah got dumped. I finally laughed until tears streamed down my face. I thought I had won, but what I didn't anticipate was that after being dumped, Hannah completely snapped, especially when she called Raymond and heard him say, "I've accepted your pursuit." That sentence completely ignited her fury. She lunged at me like a madwoman, clawing at my face and screaming, "You made my life hell. Don't you even think about living well yourself?" After that, she spread rumors everywhere, saying my private life was a mess and that I had AIDS. Even worse, Walter ended up in prison for attempted rape. She was taking revenge on everyone who had caused her and Raymond to separate. This revenge I had meticulously planned ended with no winners at all. Extra story, Hannah. In fact, the very day after I got the tattoo, I had already woken up. I was slapped awake by the hard slap my mother threw across my face. When Raymond first came to my house as a guest, and my parents learned that I was dating a rich man, they began constantly lecturing me. I had to listen to Raymond no matter what. I absolutely could not make him unhappy in the slightest. After marrying Raymond, I could take the whole family across class boundaries. What I once saw as a purely beautiful love story turned into social climbing. My rebellious streak grew wildly, like weeds. After Sarah was deceived by Cashin, she spent her days soaking in bars, and I went to comfort her. Half of it was genuine concern for my best friend of over 10 years. The other half was my way of throwing a little tantrum at Raymond. I wanted to prove that even if I didn't revolve around him, even if I went to the places he hated most, he would still worry about me, still be unable to leave me. Watching his helpless expression, I felt a bit more smug each time, never noticing that the tenderness in his eyes was slowly fading, until my mother discovered the pink heart tattoo on my lower abdomen. She stormed into my room and, in front of my father, slapped me hard across the face, her voice trembling. "Are you stupid? With a family like Raymond's, do you really think they'd tolerate a daughter-in-law with tattoos on her body? Can't you see what kind of intentions that Sarah girl has? She's jealous of you, she wants to ruin you." The slap burned, but it cleared my head more than halfway. My mother exposed Sarah's scheming, but even then I still clung to wishful thinking. I believed that Raymond loved me so much he would forgive me this once, that I still had a chance to make things right. But Raymond's attitude dealt me the cruelest blow. When he saw the tattoo, he didn't get angry, and he didn't question me. From that day on, all he had left for me was desire, and he even watched closely to make sure I took birth control every time. Posting that intimate photo with Walter was my final, desperate gamble. I waited for him to send furious questions, even if it was just to scold me. Then I could cry and apologize, say it was all Sarah's instigation, promise to cut ties with her completely, and beg him to marry me. But what I got instead was his comment under my post. "Since you chose someone else, I'll let go. I wish you happiness." And then the notification that I had been blocked. Even after being truly dumped, I still refused to give up. I squatted outside his house, waiting for him, crying as I explained that everything was Sarah's fault. But the way he looked at me was as cold as ice, without a trace of warmth. When I tried to grab his hand, he even stepped back and said coldly, "If you keep harassing me, I'll sue you to return every gift I've ever given you." I knew he meant it, and that he could do it. There had once been a supervisor at my company who harassed me. Raymond went to warn him, and the men brushed him off with contempt. A few days later, that supervisor got into a fight with some street thugs and ended up beaten into the hospital. I didn't dare gamble. I could only leave in humiliation. In the days after the breakup, resentment wrapped around me so tightly I could barely breathe. I went crazy with revenge, spreading rumors about Sarah everywhere. I didn't even spare Walter, watching all of them meet miserable ends. The anger in my heart dissipated, leaving behind only emptiness. Later, through an introduction, I met a programmer. He was honest by nature, and his conditions were fairly decent. When he saw the tattoo on my lower abdomen, I panicked and lied, saying it was something I foolishly got in high school. I asked whether he minded. He smiled and shook his head, saying, "I don't mind." I thought I had finally grabbed hold of a lifeline. I married him, learned to do housework, cooked the dishes he loved, and tried my best to play the role of a qualified wife. But that fragile peace shattered completely the moment I saw the flirtatious messages on his phone. I held the phone and confronted him. But he showed no guilt at all. Instead, he stared at my tattoo again and asked once more. So, what does that tattoo really mean? That's it, then.